If the inspiring friendship between Chris Cornell and Chester Bennington doesn't make you tear up, the way their stories ended will. Here's what you need to know about the bond between these fallen stars. Before the two even met, Chris Cornell had already made a huge impact on Chester Bennington's life, all thanks to his work with Soundgarden. In an interview with Metal Hammer, the Linkin Park frontman explained, "I grew up listening to Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Nirvana. I don't think any music scene influenced me as much as the scene that came out of Seattle. There was so much great music that came out of Seattle at that time, so it was really cool for me to be out there with one of my heroes, and we got along really well." Groups like Soundgarden inspired Bennington and his bandmates to form Linkin Park, which led to a similar level of fame for the rock stars. Years later, the singer commented more than once about how his times performing with Cornell were some of the best experiences of his life.
I've been a huge fan of Chris, and to be able to do this is we're blessed.
In 2002, Linkin Park started a new multi-genre tour called Project Revolution, which was continued over several years due to its popularity. Chris Cornell joined the fifth one in 2007, so it was around that time that he was introduced to Chester Bennington. The Linkin Park singer told Metal Hammer, "We'd bring in tons of different acts, and Chris Cornell was on one of our tours. I think this was when we were touring Minutes to Midnight. Anyway, we met then. We got along really well right away." During Project Revolution, Cornell joined Bennington on stage for a duet version of numerous songs, including a cover of Temple of the Dog's Hunger Strike. Bennington also talked about the memorable experience of singing the hit with his new friend and said, "It's kind of funny, but my wife would always tease me because when Chris and I would do that song, we would always stare at each other. She'd be like, 'Look at you guys staring at each other on stage all night.' That was just because of my admiration for him as a person and as a performer and the friendship we were developing. He was just really special. It was a special time." During the Project Revolution tour, Chester Bennington and Chris Cornell grew to be such good friends that they basically became family. Cornell then honored Bennington with a request to signify the strong bond they had formed. The Linkin Park singer explained to Metal Hammer, "We stayed in touch, and that developed into Chris and Vicky asking me to be the godfather of their son, Christopher. One of my favorite memories of our friendship was the baptism and the christening, and taking on that promise to the family. That was really great." Their second child, Christopher Nicholas, was born a few years before in 2005 and was the only son of the couple. Both Cornell and his wife most likely felt that asking Bennington to take on that role was a great way to show how much he had meant to both of them once he entered their lives. Bennington deeply enjoyed simply spending time with Cornell. When asked what his favorite memories of their friendship were, he answered, "Obviously, the christening of their son Christopher and being invited into the family. That was really special. Definitely the times we had just hanging out, which were very few and far between. Sitting by the pool with the kids, just kind of talking." A major factor that cemented the bond between Bennington and Cornell was that not only did they hit it off, but their wives Vicky and Talinda did as well. When talking to Metal Hammer, Bennington explained, "I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but sometimes you meet somebody and it's like you've known them forever. And that was really the case between our families. I think if it was just me and Chris talking, hanging out, we would be good acquaintances. But the friendship between our wives, you add that into the mix and things escalate a little bit more." Talinda and Vicky were not in the public eye as much as their rock star husbands, but there are still glimpses into their lives that clearly show they all felt the same way as Bennington. Because some people in this world have a sickening lack of empathy, Vicky endured despicable abuse from trolls online after the tragic passing of her husband. Talinda was quick to support her friend and tweeted, "I am deeply saddened by humanity. I just came across a stream of people tweeting vile lies about Chris Cornell, his death, and his wife. Disgusting. It's crossing a line so deep for me. That's my family. Show some respect." It's clear that Chris Cornell was hugely impressed with Chester Bennington for his dedication to their craft. In an interview with Rolling Stone, the Soundgarden frontman was asked about the impact that live music made on his life, and he instantly thought of a performance of Bennington's that inspired him. Cornell said, "When we toured Australia, Chester broke his wrist on the third song, and then finished the whole set with a broken wrist. That kind of dedication and passion, this is what I'm doing. This is the most important thing there is. I'm on stage right now. That affects me." Like a good friend, Cornell also said things to Bennington that truly lifted him up. The Linkin Park singer gave a great example of this to Metal Hammer that was both funny and heartwarming. When Cornell told him he'd have to sing the more difficult part of their duet, Bennington explained, doing Hunger Strike with Chris, and I had to hit the really high parts. The best compliment I ever got was from Chris. After we did it, he left and said, "Dude, you're not supposed to be able to do that, man. I made you sing that on purpose so you wouldn't do it as well." So that was a huge compliment to me. As the lead singers of massively successful bands, Linkin Park, Soundgarden, and Audioslave, along with their numerous side projects, both Chester Bennington and Chris Cornell were not able to spend as much time with all of their friends as they would have liked. But the two men understood this, and the dedication both had to their families was just another thing they had in common that made their friendship even stronger. In the interview with Metal Hammer, Bennington described the rare yet special times the two were able to hang out and said, "Whenever they were in town, we would try to connect. Sometimes it was difficult because we were all so busy. Chris and I were similar in many ways in that we had a lot of dear friends, but we didn't necessarily see them all the time because our personal lives are so busy and our dedication to our families is so strong." One thing Bennington and Cornell shared was their experiences with addiction throughout much of their lives. In 2009, the Linkin Park frontman gave a very candid interview with Noise Creep and admitted, "My life was falling apart in many ways that I was writing about on this record in terms of getting divorced, in terms of diving very hard into alcohol and drugs throughout this process." Crawling is probably the most literal song lyrically I'd ever written for Linkin Park, and that's about feeling like I had no control over myself in terms of drugs and alcohol. Similarly, Cornell talked briefly about his addiction issues that really began in his 20s, as he explained to Spin in 2006. "Unfortunately, being a child of two alcoholics, I started drinking a lot, and that's what eventually got me back into drugs. You often hear that pot leads to harder drugs, but I think alcohol is what leads you to everything, because it takes away the fear. The worst drug experimentation I ever did was because I was drunk and didn't care." Cornell got to a better place in 2003, but a shoulder injury got him addicted to benzodiazepine after he was prescribed Ativan by a physician in 2016.
In retrospect, I've learned that it's not supposed to be given to anybody who's in recovery.
On May 17, 2017, Chris Cornell tragically died by suicide in a Detroit hotel room. Upon learning the fate of the beloved rock star, his family was absolutely devastated by the loss. This included Chester Bennington, whose close friendship with Cornell practically made him a member as well. The Linkin Park frontman was deeply saddened by the loss and wrote a long, heartfelt tribute letter on Twitter that said, "Thoughts of you flooded my mind and I wept. I'm still weeping with sadness as well as gratitude for having shared some very special moments with you and your beautiful family. You have inspired me in many ways you could never have known. Your talent was pure and unrivaled. Your voice was joy and pain, anger and forgiveness, love and heartache, all wrapped up into one. I suppose that's what we all are. You helped me understand that." Bennington also added, "I can't imagine a world without you in it. I pray you find peace in the next life. I send my love to your wife and your children, friends, and family. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your life. With all my love." The late singer's wife, Vicky, and the Cornell family suspected that the Ativan Chris was prescribed had a terribly negative effect on his actions, and that he may still be here if it were not for the drug.
I don't think that he could make any decisions because of the level of impairment.
Linkin Park was already scheduled to perform their song Heavy on Jimmy Kimmel Live when Chester Bennington heard the heartbreaking news that Chris Cornell had passed.
In light of our dear friend Chris Cornell passing away, we decided to play our song One More Light.
When talking to Metal Hammer, Bennington explained his struggle to get through the show and said, "I got to sing through that a few times, break down, cry a little bit, pull myself together." Although Bennington admitted it was difficult to perform, his bandmate Mike Shinoda revealed to Radio.com that the singer downplayed how hard it was for him. Shinoda said, "When we were doing a sound check, Chester couldn't even make it through the song. He was getting halfway through and getting choked up. And even when we did play the whole song, and it was live on TV or taped for film for TV, he kind of just stopped towards the end like he missed the last couple lines, just couldn't finish the song." Cornell's widow, Vicky, asked Bennington to perform at her late husband's funeral, and the Linkin Park frontman accepted without hesitation. Because of his previous tribute to his friend on Jimmy Kimmel Live, Bennington felt more emotionally prepared for the performance. The singer really wanted to come up with the best song to honor Cornell, so he prayed for help in making the decision until he chose a perfect option. Bennington explained to Metal Hammer, "I knew from our conversations that he'd been friends with Jeff Buckley, and they were close, so I felt that Hallelujah would be a good song. It's my favorite song of all time. I think it's the best song that's ever been written. In all of the versions that have been done, Jeff Buckley's is my favorite. So that was a nice tie, somebody that Chris was close to. After Bennington's rendition of the popular Leonard Cohen song, Cornell's two daughters, Lily and Toni, also performed to honor their father. It was a heartbreaking event for all of them to take part in, but the singer felt his friend would have liked the way it turned out. Only 2 months after the death of Chris Cornell, Chester Bennington died by suicide as well, on what had been the 53rd birthday of his close friend. Similar to how drugs may have played a role in the tragic passing of Cornell, traces of either MDMA or methamphetamines were found in Bennington's blood, along with a small amount of alcohol. One silver lining to the horrible tragedies was that through the friendship of the two men, their wives and families became incredibly close and had each other throughout all of the deep sadness. Vicky Cornell wrote on Twitter, "Just when I thought my heart couldn't break anymore, I love you, T." Like her mother, Lily Cornell was heartbroken over Bennington's death and tweeted, "I love you so much. Thank you for always being there for me and my family. Thank you for being the kindest human being imaginable. And thank you for your legendary voice. There is a gaping hole in the world without you." Unfortunately, Bennington's widow, Talinda, had to deal with sick people on social media, but Vicky supported her friend just as the other had done for her months before. She wrote, "Sadly empathize with Talinda B. Cruel, malicious, baseless attacks, but when they go low, we go high. I love you, T." Talinda responded shortly after, "God gave us our husbands, our babies, and each other. We will always stand back to back and heart to heart. We travel this road together. I love you." If you or anyone you know is struggling with addiction issues, help is available. Visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or contact SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP 4357.